Hello and welcome to the Barcast. I'm your host, Nick Barr, coming to you on a Sunday afternoon here in Slovakia. Having a lovely European summer, and it wouldn't be complete without a little Enneagram thinking. I'm going to do something kind of reckless today and just jam on the Enneagram and time. So, orientation to time is something you'll see in the modern Enneagram. I love Suzanne Stabile, and she references orientation to time a lot. As far as I know, you won't find that in Naranjo or Ichazo, so it seems to be sort of a later addition. And so I find the orientation to time model really helpful, and yet I don't really completely get it. And so I want to kind of think about it from first principles with you. So I've started just drawing the core numbers of the Enneagram. And if you've seen my post on Enneagram and the Sin framework, this will be familiar to you. If not, I'll quickly recapitulate. So even before we have personality types, we can think of sort of the triad of forgetting and fear and deceit as a somewhat complete description of like fallenness or the sort of human condition that we find ourselves in, the sort of fragmented, unwhole situation that we find ourselves in, that the Enneagram is here to help us get out of. And I like to use Genesis as a source here. So in Genesis, Adam and Eve first sort of forget the instructions of God, or forget that they're not supposed. There's a sort of lapse. There's a confusion or a stupidity or an incipience. There's all sorts of words from all sorts of traditions to describe this basic forgetting of one's true nature. And in the quote unquote Eastern traditions, Buddhism is the one that I know best. That's the first step. Christianity is a little bit less sure about which of these is first, forgetting, fear, or deceit. I've just been reading a little Augustine, and he writes, it's not, you have to be very, very subtle and discerning to tell whether pride comes first or incipience comes first. If Augustine's not sure, we're not going to get clarity. So let's just, for now, say forgetting comes first, which makes sense to me, right? Like from a non-dual perspective, we have to forget in order to even experience separation. There has to be some basic kind of confusion or lapse or mistake. And it's a somewhat innocent mistake. So there's forgetting. Then from that forgetting, Adam and Eve eat of the fruit and are immediately afraid. So they sort of see something, are surprised by something, and the immediate response to that groundlessness is fear. That fear lasts only a moment, and then we move into deceit. They cover themselves up, they hide in a bush, they lie to their father, God, and so there's deceit. And Naranjo, describes this, not using necessarily Genesis, but points to this progression here. And then, of course, it repeats itself, right? So the deceit isn't just to others. The deceit has to be to oneself to be complete deceit as well. And so there's more forgetting or numbing of one's access to truth. One has to essentially kill or turn off more parts of oneself to maintain a lie, because that lie has to be maintained to oneself. There's more forgetting, then there's more groundlessness, then there's more fear, and there's more deceit, and so on. And so it creates a spiral. If this is interesting to you and you want to go deeper on it, I have another post on it. So, fine. Orientation to time can be inserted here. So the 9's orientation to time is the past. The 6's orientation to time is the present. And the 3's orientation to time is future. And let's just see if I'm just reciting that from Enneagram teachers. let's see if we can, from first principles, work out why that is the case. So let's start with forgetting. When I think about the 9 energy, and I'm going this is a little bit prior to the 9 types of the Enneagram. This is a little bit prior to that. This is a little bit more like even more primordial. It's a little bit more like the Buddhist 3 poisons, which we might as well call out here. This is the poison of stupidity. This is the poison of aversion. This is the poison of attraction. So we're kind of at that level of basic qualities yet. So even though I've written 963, we're not yet at the fully blown out personality types. Forgetting, what do we do when we forgot something? We say, where did I put that? So for me, forgetting is a fairly clear connection to the past. It's an animalistic, almost sort of like Bayesian model of like, well, my keys are always in this drawer, and I open my keys and they're not there. Well, where did I put them? There's an immediate appeal to the past, or an orientation to the past of where was I when I last had the keys? There's sort of a rehearsal, a rumination, a going over of the past. And that's how animals, I think, that's how instinct works. Animals are informed by the past of their own lives and the past of their genetics, and essentially sort of operate on expectations based on past performance, past experience. So to me, it makes sense that this forgetting energy is connected to the past. And even when we, using Genesis again here, when the snake says, or the serpent encourages Eve to eat of the fruit, she sort of rehearses past, well, God told us this. It's not an alive instruction for her. She's doing her best to remember what he told them. And in fact, she kind of paraphrases it. So you can see how the past has this kind of corrosive quality to it. Forgetting, when we remember, we make things alive again. It's not just recalling, but that we can get into that some other time. So fine, 9 is the past. So 6, fear, the present. The fear response, right, is that famous adrenaline. Is that the amygdala? I'm not sure. I'm the wrong person to talk about brain science with, but like fight, flight, freeze. Fear being the mind killer. Of course, we're in the thinking triad here, so the way that fear affects thinking, and it's a very present experience. When we are afraid, the now is somehow sort of frozen for us and gets very small and tight, and we either are fighting out of fear, or we're fleeing out of fear, or we're frozen out of fear, or we move into a fawning response out of fear. Although fawning probably belongs a little bit more in the deceit, I think, if we're being accurate. Fawning, to me, seems one click after these other more primitive responses to fear. But there's an immediacy, I think we could say safely. There's an immediacy to the present, to fear, to what's going on now. And then deceit, the future. Yeah, so deceit or lying or image. why do Adam and Eve lie to God? Or why does Adam lie to God? They're afraid, but they're afraid of, I guess you could say, future punishment. When we lie, we have ideas about the future that our lying serves to kind of manifest those ideas about the future. Lying is the creation of a story, and so it sort of involves planning to some extent. No? Can you lie without a plan? No, I mean, fear can fuel the lie, but at that point you're into the future. You're fleeing into a safe future in which you're not punished or caught. And that's the shame energy, the shame of being caught, that comes up for that future area, the deceit area. So to me, these make intuitive sense. And let's just check to see if it also makes sense with the centers of intelligence. So, we have doing, thinking, feeling. But we should maybe even just call it out here. This is conflicted. Conflicted thinking, conflicted feeling. So these are, it's important to call out because the 9 is doing centered and doing repressed, to use Stabile's language. The 6 is thinking centered and thinking repressed. The 3 is feeling centered and feeling repressed. So they're all conflicted in their doing, thinking, feeling. I think, again, like the animal that doesn't know what to do reaches this kind of stupidity. And the question is like, what should I do? Now, what should be done? I mean, I think of doing as very action oriented, and so very, very in the present in a way. But here, like, not knowing what to do is maybe lacking information. And information in this kind of context is like what, based on the past. It's sort of rote doing that's interrupted or conflicted because there's not enough information, or the information is confusing in some way. Doesn't feel as we bring in doing, thinking, feeling, all these connections. I mean, these are a lot of connections that we're making here. So I wouldn't expect this whole thing to hold up in a really tight way, but we're just trying it out. So conflicted thinking, I do think that makes more sense. Again, when we talk about fear being the mind killer, there's a way that fear destroys thinking, but then also, again, we become thinking centered. So it's both when we're afraid. Now, why can't I just say, well, when I'm afraid, the question is, what do I do? I guess it's more about like knowing what to do. When we're really afraid, we don't even know what to do. I think the nine is a more bodily conflicted doing. It's not that the animal doesn't know what to do. It's sort of a short circuiting. There's more of a short circuiting with conflicted doing. With conflicted thinking, I don't think it's a short circuiting, but it's a frozenness as one's mind races, but races completely with unproductive thinking. That's another way you could talk about conflicted, unproductive doing, unproductive thinking, unproductive feeling. Maybe that's even better than conflicted. So information is pouring in now, but it's noisy in some way. And then with the future, what do feelings have to do with the future? I mean, I think in deceit, the moment of lying, right before we go numb, right before this arrow here, the moment of lying, there is a self-abandonment. There is a feeling of heart. It could be heartbreak or heart stabbing or a feeling of shame. Something happens to the heart when we lie to ourselves or to others. And it's because we're making a choice. We're choosing a future that kind of doesn't involve our true selves. So you could make some sort of connection between future and feeling there. But overall, as I've added doing and thinking, feeling, I don't think things have gotten much clearer for me. And then, of course, we'll talk about other than numbers in a minute. But before we do that, I want to throw in Heidegger. Why not? Who provides a framework for temporality that is, I don't think Heidegger had anything to do with the Enneagram as far as I know, but they're playing in the same field, I would say. So again, we're talking about temporality, these three times, past, present, and future, not as like literally quote unquote literal past, present, or future, but as orientations. And Heidegger's point is that care, the structure of how we care or what we care about or what we're concerned with is what creates our notion of time. Time is a product of care rather than a somehow real objective thing that care gets spread across. And so he has these three words that I'll just throw out and we'll see what comes up for them. So past orientation has to do with this thrownness. I guess there's just one N in thrownness. Thrownness. Present is fascination. Oh, maybe fallenness, huh? Fallenness, I think. We can look that up later, but let's stick with fallenness for now. And then the future orientation is projection. So as I write these, I realize I am in no position to speak with authority on what each of these means in detail, certainly not be faithful to Heidegger, but I'm just throwing them out there. Speaking of throwing, so thrownness. we find ourselves in a situation. We're always finding ourselves in some kind of situation. As if we've been like thrown off a horse or thrown ashore, and there's sort of flotsam and jetsam around us. We're always finding ourselves sort of dumped out into things. And so for me, stupidity feels very close to thrownness. I get the sense of feeling thrown off a horse with this quality. And there's a headache associated with it. There's a concussion. There's like a concussive quality to this confusion of how did I get here? And again, we're talking like moment to moment. We're not talking necessarily about those big life moments like the talking heads of like, how did I get this beautiful house or whatever? Like, this is sort of a more moment to moment thrown into a situation. We're never creating a situation from scratch, you could say, right? We never find ourselves the designers of our situation. Even if I bought all this stuff around me, I never look at it as being sort of put here and arranged by myself. So thrown into the situation. Now, what does that have? So I can see what that has to do with stupidity. What does that have to do with the past? Well, I think there's a feeling of ejectedness, not rejected necessarily, but ejectedness. It's much more neutral. And there is, I think the immediate question with ejected is like, how did I get here? What is like, how did this come to transpire? There's an appeal to the past to explain the present, but that appeal is not satisfied. Thrownness. Fallenness so I get a little bit mixed up because Heidegger talks about falling and fallen and also talks about fascination. I think they're all related, but I'm trying to speak to fallenness in this moment. This has to do with idle chatter. It has to do with sort of like but that feels more future to me. It feels a little bit deceitful, fallenness. It's a way we allow ourselves to get sort of caught up in the present. These things around us, then we sort of just fall in love with them. We get fascinated by them. How about the weather? There's a kind of like idle kind of a bullshitting quality to it. And I don't think Heidegger makes a connection to fear necessarily there, but I think it makes sense. This feels a little Seven-ish to me. It's sort of like it's a way to stay busy. And why do we stay busy? Because there's a fear of the groundlessness. Going back to thrownness is prior to, in a way, fallenness. Like when I'm touching thrownness, I'm much closer to the moment of ejection from union or from some less fragmented place. By the time I'm in fallenness, my concerns are with the situation around me that I take as real. And then projecting into future possibilities comes right after that, which is then having certain stories or kind of commitments I have around how to navigate the world based on ideas I have about myself or who I need to be or how things ought to be used, projecting into future possibilities. I'm going to pause there, and I'm going to learn a little bit more about Heidegger, and let's come back. So ChatGPT has assured me that this is an alignment that is interpretively sound and rich. Certainly, I think the 3 energy, this future orientation, projecting onto future possibilities, that sounds very 3-ish to me. That sounds very true of that future-oriented core energy. 6 as absorption into, here I think ChatGPT makes an interesting point about absorption into das Man, the they, where Heidegger and Kierkegaard sort of share this critique of like mediocrity or the middle, the they. What would they think? This is how we sit at the dinner table. This is how there's a norming that happens in any society that is simultaneously very natural to that society and is also extremely toxic to authenticity, to authentic living, and I think a critique of that 6 energy, that fear, is sort of a hyper attunement to the present and to social context. I think that's reasonable. And then we've talked to 9s on the Barcast before who do feel overwhelmed or sort of thrown. Now, I'm not sure if that's really the thrownness. I don't know if Heidegger would say there's a feeling of overwhelm necessarily with thrownness, but disconnected from agency maybe. So here ChatGPT makes an interesting suggestion. Of kind of finding, but I don't know how it's coming up with these owning throwness for 3s. I mean, it's interesting. Okay, we're going to decline the invitation to turn this into a paper for now, but yeah, I think there is something helpful in doing this kind of like cluster analysis, I guess you could call it, of orientation to time, the 3 poisons, Heidegger and temporality, and then the Enneagram. And of course, we have to remember that we then have these sort of alternate responses to the so you can be in the thinking triad and be past oriented, for instance, as the 5 is, or in the thinking triad and future oriented as the 7 is. So that's Suzanne Stabille's framework. So ultimately, for instance, if we're looking at past, the 5 is also past oriented, as is the 4. The 6 is thinking oriented, as is the I wanted to put a square on that, present. And you could do more analysis on this. For instance, I do think there's something to be said about the way that 1s and 2s, I think, are more norms oriented. I think they are more probably oriented toward the they than the other types. So some of this holds up. But I think also what's happening is when we move into the 9, we're just adding another layer of complexity, and we're also moving further downstream from kind of the source of the separation or the source of the fragmentation. And so we're moving further away from Heidegger too, I think. But all of these are present, right? All temporalities, we all live in past, present, future. So it's kind of obvious. But yeah, one of the things I like about Suzanne Stabille's framework is it gives us, I really appreciate her insistency on balance. And so, for instance, for past-oriented types, 9, 5, and 4, the withdrawn stance, recognizing one's rumination on the past and then moving into the present and the future as ways to balance that out. Or for the 3, who's future-oriented, as well as 7, 8, these are planners, schemers, people who maybe are willing to spend some time with their past. It just shows opportunities for balance. And I think those are well designed by Suzanne Stabile. Whereas Heidegger would never really, I don't think, talk in those kinds of terms about bringing more projection or bringing more thrownness into one's being. So they're operating at like different levels, you could say. Okay, thanks for joining me for that jam session. Hope you enjoyed it.